Obviously, Ben Johnson is most important for Caleb Williams' development, but the secret weapon to getting the most out of the young quarterback is Case Keenum.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to explore more deeply Case Keenum's role in this Bears quarterback room, in this Bears locker room, and in Caleb Williams' development. Because I think when Case Keenum was first signed, it was a little bit of an afterthought as like, okay, veteran number 3 QB should be able to kind of help out, but might not even make the 53-man roster. We'll just kind of see how this goes. But as we've learned more about him and his role in this Bears offense, it's becoming more clear like just how important having Case Keenum will be for Caleb's development and already has been for his development. So we'll hear Ben Johnson talk about the role that Keenum is playing. We'll hear Keenum talk about some of the ways he's helping Caleb Williams, and we'll wrap up with a bigger picture look at sort of this focus on attention to details and the way that they're pushing Caleb and the rest of the team to really lock in right now at OTAs. But this assumption that Keenum is probably just going to come in as the number 3 quarterback and that Tyson Bagent shouldn't have too much trouble with him, I think we were a little bit too quick to jump on that. And maybe I can just point the finger at myself here. Maybe you knew better than this. But you look at Case Keenum, he missed pretty much all of 2024 with an injury. Wasn't really part of the Houston Texans team this past season. He placed on injured reserve at the end of August with a foot injury, so never even got a snap in the regular season. The year before that, he'd played in 2 games for the Texans, threw 53 passes for 291 yards and a touchdown, like as a backup for C.J. Stroud, but hadn't really played much in any of the last 4 years. It wasn't since like 2019 that he was a starter for the Washington Commanders, and it's kind of been a backup number 2 and sometimes number 3 quarterback since then. And so coming off of an injury, doesn't get signed in free agency at all. We kind of assume Bears already have Tyson Bagent as their number 2 quarterback. So Keenum's just going to be that number 3. Like I think of it equivalent to when the Bears had Mark Sanchez back in 2016, 2017 kind of range, where like there was really never an intent for Sanchez to have to play on the field, but he was in the building and to be a sort of a mentor and an extra coach in the quarterback room, or like Nathan Peterman a couple of seasons ago. The same idea I thought for Keenum, but turns out he is not only a great mentor for Caleb Williams here and going to be somebody who's hands-on and helpful in this, but also he's in a clear, open competition for the number 2 quarterback role. I think ultimately the development of Caleb and the mentorship there will be the most important part, but Ben Johnson addressed here after OTA's practice what that relationship looks like with Keenum in the room and how he fits into the competition for being the Bears' number 2 quarterback this season.
How have you seen Keenum helping Caleb throughout the process?
Case has been phenomenal. I haven't been with him in the past, but he came highly recommended from a number of people that I trust. He's got skins on the wall. I mean, he's been to playoff games. He's won playoff games. He's done it at a high level. He's been the number 2 quarterback at a number of different places as well. So his experience level is off the charts. He's seen a little bit of everything that this league has to offer, and I can say from my experience of being in the room with him, he finds a good way to ask questions that I might not, or Declan or JT, we might not have provided the answer to prior. So he does a good job filling those gaps. And then, of course, we're constrained so much by the time limits in the springtime that he's able to help the process when we're not in there as coaches.
On that note, we saw him the last 2 weeks with running the 2s, and today with the 2-minute offense, him still there in that position. Is he in running that for that position, him and Tyson?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how we explained it to him. That's how we explained it to Tyson. We're going to continue to mix up the reps over the course of the preseason, and then at some point in training camp, we'll make a decision with who has earned that number 2 job, and we'll go with it. But for right now, we got to battle. Just like we've been saying from the start of the springtime, there is no depth chart. We want as much competition to create growth that we possibly can.
So under the collective bargaining agreement, there are limits on how much time the coaching staff can work directly with players. There's limits to how much time they can be on the field, how many practices they can have, and even how much time they can spend, in the film room and in meetings and stuff. Personally, I don't know how they actually fully enforce that. I think it's something that's sort of self-reported, but nonetheless, there are rules that teams, we assume, generally follow pretty well. And so there's only so much time Ben Johnson can spend with Caleb one-on-one, so much time that offensive coordinator Declan Doyle can spend one-on-one, quarterbacks coach JT Barrett can spend, not just one-on-one, I guess, but in group settings with players in general. It's not just quarterbacks, but the entire team and any position group has limits on how much time the coaching staff can spend with them. And so having someone like Case Keenum with the type of experience he has with more than a decade in the NFL, more than 80, or actually exactly 80 games under his belt, but he's thrown over 2,000 passes in the league, and he's played for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different teams in the league, including multiple stints with the Houston Texans. He's seen a bit of everything. And so even if he's not necessarily literally acting as a quarterback's coach for Caleb Williams, right? He's not always going to be hands-on watching his footwork and correcting it while Caleb is running a drill necessarily, but he can be such a valuable resource and can notice some things like a quarterback's coach, can point out things if they're watching film or whatever. There's some aspects of that where players can kind of coach each other up a little bit when they see things. There's something to be said about another set of eyes looking at you as opposed to you trying to look at you and figure out what you're doing wrong. And having that set of eyes have, again, 12 years of experience and 7 different teams and 80 different games, as opposed to those eyes being, Tyson Bagent, who's a quality backup quarterback for sure, but a young guy who hasn't been in the league that long and has only ever played for the Bears, right? There's an extra bonus of having Keenum be that set of eyes and also that resource to ask is hey, what are you seeing here? Or how have you handled this situation in the past? Because you like to think that at this stage of Case Keenum's career, he's played in just about every kind of offense you can play in. He's faced every kind of defense you can face. He's been in just about any possible down and distance and game situation scenario that you can possibly think of. And while he doesn't always, he can't always just make Caleb learn and understand. You can't, force it per se, but he can be that knowledge there. And we heard Case Keenum say that Caleb has really been like a sponge, someone who just is humble enough to ask questions despite, all the attention and hype that he gets, over the course of his college career, being a Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 pick, and all that stuff. Like there's a clear, really positive relationship there, and a nice balancing act by Case Keenum, who has to do a little bit of preparing himself to be the number 2 quarterback, and he's in his own quarterback competition, so he can't spend all of his time just catering to whatever Caleb Williams might want or need, but also knows that he's brought in part to do that and wants to help Caleb Williams and sees tremendous potential in Caleb Williams. So I think he could be one of the voices in the film room maybe that Caleb Williams was looking for that wasn't there enough last season with Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown and the previous Bears coaching staff. And Case Keenum gave us some really good perspective on that process, on learning to watch film in the NFL and some of the things he's helping Caleb Williams with. So I want to go into some of the specific value that Keenum provides Caleb with some tangible examples here in the film room next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, and live betting, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If basketball's not your thing, you can bet on the hockey playoffs, Major League Baseball, tennis, soccer, boxing, or you can look ahead to the football season. You can bet on the Bears' Week 1 game against the Vikings, their odds to make the playoffs, win the NFC North, Ben Johnson's Coach of the Year odds, and so much more, all in the FanDuel app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. If you're new to FanDuel, It's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If that bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets added into your account on top of the winnings from your $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA and NFL. So it's easy to sort of think about the idea of Case Keenum being like a resource and a sounding board per se for Caleb Williams. But like sometimes that can be a little bit abstract of a concept. It's like, okay, you got the smart old wise guy in the room, and old at what he's like, 37. So I mean, old is always relative here, but in NFL quarterback terms, he's old. He's also notably like 9 years older than the Bears offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle. That's sort of a separate conversation and not a real concern. He was actually asked about that and certainly downplayed it there because Declan Doyle is really smart and really, really absorbs things quickly. But nonetheless, for Caleb, right, it's about being able to rely on that experience in specific ways. And especially coming off of, that ESPN story where Caleb said, hey, there wasn't anybody there to help me watch film. And we heard Caleb Williams respond to that. I mean, it was his initial quote, so not respond, but like to build off of that, to sort of clarify that on yesterday's Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you go back and take a listen to that episode if you haven't heard it already, where he said essentially, it wasn't that I didn't know how to watch film. It's that I wanted them to push me and coach me and point out the specific things that they want me to watch for and try and make the most out of my film watching time by directing it in a certain direction, as opposed to just generally trying to pay attention and look at what went wrong and figure out what you need to do better. It's like, no, tell me what you want me to focus on, that kind of stuff. And transitioning from college to the NFL, it's a different animal when it comes to watching film. That, like, yes, it is literally 11 guys on 11 guys playing football, and you're running, some of the same route concepts and some of the same coverage concepts, but there's so much more complexity to it at the NFL level than what Caleb was running in high school, in college and high school before that. And I thought Case Keenum did a really good job of explaining what the differences are and what this idea is of like learning how to watch film, right? It's not literally I don't know how to watch film. It's learning what you don't know, like learning the extra things you should look for and pay attention to beyond the stuff you've already known to look for and pay attention to because of how you did it in college and how much more there is to it at the NFL level. So here's how Case Keenum described it.
Caleb just kind of shot down the notion about that he didn't know how to watch film or nobody was watching film with him during his rookie season. I imagine that it's the intricacies of knowing what to watch for are so much more complex going from college to your first year in the NFL. Can you think back to your rookie season and like just how you learned how to do it at the pro level and probably how much more proficient you are now from 2012?
Yeah, I say rookies don't know what they don't know. And it's just kind of the way it goes. We come from a similar offense. I think Lincoln took the the air raid or whatever we ran at Houston and made it his own, and obviously kind of a branch off of that and has done tremendously well with it. For me coming out, I didn't know the difference in base and sub defense. I didn't know that you could take a play and then go to the other hash and run that same play backwards. It blew my mind. We ran everything right-handed in Houston. And not to say that we weren't really good. I mean, one of the most prolific college offenses that's ever been. But that's just the way we ran. We ran it fast, we ran it up-tempo, and we were going to just do what we did better than anybody else, and didn't matter what defense is out there. The NFL is a little bit differently in how you can think about personnel groups, huddling, operation, play calling, all of the above, that you just don't know what you don't know sometimes, and it's just a daily process of us adding more tools to your tool belt until you look up and, Caleb's been here 10 years with Ben, and, so many different plays they've run together that they're speaking, don't even have to speak, that they know each other's thinking at times. I could see that happening.
That to me sounds like the exact kind of detail and direction that Caleb Williams was looking for last season that he was talking about in the quote in the ESPN story about people not being there to watch film with him. Because like Caleb Williams can throw on his film and say, hey, if this pass was incomplete, yeah, it was because I threw it too high here, threw it too low here, or thought he was going to be there, or my feet were bad here. Like he can, and just about anybody, if you know anything about football, like you can find sort of the surface level understanding of what went wrong and maybe loosely a pretty good idea as to why. But when you have that sort of institutional knowledge and coaches and coach in the room, in Case Keenum in this case, in there, like you can take that understanding to the next level and squeeze a lot more out of every minute of film work that you do. And that's what Caleb Williams talked about, we heard on yesterday's podcast, right? It was about sort of making it more efficient so that if you spend an hour rewatching a game, are you getting a little bit out of it, or are you getting a lot out of it by understanding all the little details of, okay, how, because we were on this hash and they were in that coverage, it changed this leverage for that receiver. And that means I should have anticipated his route to be there, not just I underthrew him or I should have got rid of the ball quicker, but it's sort of the why there, the deeper level understanding, so that as you watch each different possibility and each play and each little thing that goes wrong, like you build this Rolodex, this memory, this experience on your belt of like, okay, to where you get to the point of having seen every possible little combination of route versus coverage versus down and distance versus game situation that can affect how a play works. Like this is the true complexity of football that is mostly just present at the NFL level. Like, they don't get into that kind of detail at the high school level, certainly, and not even at a lot of colleges. As Case Keenum said, like he was a really prolific college quarterback at Houston, but even there, like they were super, super successful and didn't need to overcomplicate things. They just kind of ran the same thing regardless of coverage. But in the NFL, there are so many more variables and intricacies to any given play and situation to try and find that one little edge where you can tweak one thing and be ahead of the defense there. And those are the things that Caleb Williams was so desperately seeking. And like, he's like, help me find the answer. Show me what to look for. Show me where I can find the secrets to unlocking even more of my game. And that support infrastructure wasn't there last year. And so it's sort of a double boost for Caleb this year, that not only does he get a coaching staff that's going to be more involved in that film work, but then even in the moments when the coaching staff isn't there, Case Keenum is there. And I can only imagine if he had a quarterback like Case Keenum last season. I think, obviously Keenum had been under contract with the Texans. He wasn't available, but like some sort of more experienced veteran quarterback in the room, like that could have at least helped bridge some of that, to have somebody who's seen more and knows more to be able to help point out some of those things instead of Caleb kind of just trying to figure it out on his own and uncover as much as he can. Because as Case kept saying, you don't know what you don't know, especially as a rookie. And so Caleb knew a lot, and he knew how to watch all the things he knew to watch for, but he didn't know what else there was to watch for. He was just never taught, never given that direction, and that's what he was looking for from the coaches, and that's what he's going to get from the current Bears coaches, and also get from having Case Keenum in the room. So I think there's just a ton of value there that's not going to show up, on a stat sheet necessarily for the value of Case Keenum, and it's not something that we can directly measure what it would have been like with or without Case Keenum, but it's so apparent that it's going to mean a lot for this quarterback's development. It's all about being able to hone in on the intricate details and maximize them. And that's really the tone Ben Johnson's trying to set across the roster. And he's trying to lay that foundation now in OTAs to kind of, establish that identity and that expectation for this team so that they can learn it now in OTAs and try and be masters of it by training camp and certainly in the regular season. Not so much masters of the playbook, but masters of the details and the expectations. And he gave a good example of one of the ways he's being kind of hard on the players and making sure that, hey, we're not cutting any corners or letting any little things slip by. So we'll take a look at the kind of culture and tone that Ben Johnson's establishing now at OTAs for Caleb Williams and the rest of the offense next on Locked On Bears. We heard in the previous regime, Matt Eberflus talked a lot about details and, the hits principle. We're going to hustle and we're going to, I intensity. And anyway, I kind of forget what the acronym is. Thank God. I'm kind of glad I don't remember fully what the acronym, right? But there was a lot of this talk of sort of the rah-rah, we're going to be the best executing, most disciplined team in football whatsoever. But I don't feel like we had a lot of like visual, concrete, tangible examples of that taking place. We knew that they would like go back in film at practice and sort of monitor and note when players were jogging in between drills. Like there was some intentionality behind, sort of enforcing effort as a thing. But, it felt like as last season went on with Matt Eberflus, right, we kept hearing about how they got to execute better. And it felt like, at times attention to detail was lacking when there'd be pre-snap penalties and players not lined up correctly and little mistakes throughout the season where it just felt like they just weren't on top of everything. And there didn't seem to be enough accountability for making sure that even the little things were done right. Like we'd hear him say it, but then there wasn't a lot of noticeable follow through from us on the outside. And maybe that's just a lack of information that we just didn't get to see it, but it was actually happening. But I don't tend to give much benefit of the doubt there. But early on for Ben Johnson now coming in, we're already seeing it and hearing it from day one. Not just hearing it like a press conference, like talking, but like when you watch practice at OTAs, you can see him calling out Cole Kmet and making him line up again and make sure that everything's correctly, like right away early in OTAs to say, hey, we're not just going to say, well, it's day one, so we'll give you a break on, little mistakes. It's fine. Just make sure you do better next time. It's like, no, we're not gonna allow any of that. And not that, the Cole Kmet example, not that Kmet was doing it on purpose or anything, but just like they're going to be firm on setting the tone and the example and the expectation early that there's no cutting corners. There's no lollygag and there's no taking it easy. There's none of that. There's just going to be an expectation that things are done right and correctly. And they're going to drill that in over and over again to make sure that it happens, even on really little simple things like how they get into the huddle and how they break the huddle. Not even how they line up, not like where they are in the line of scrimmage, but like just leaving the huddle. Like that's one of the clear, easy examples that Ben Johnson gave some detail about after an OTA's practice this week.
I saw you guys make them go back in the huddle several times. What exactly are you looking for in the huddle and as they come out of it?
Yeah, there's a certain way that the play needs to get communicated in the huddle. There's a certain way that the break should sound to us around us that means that we're ready for business and we're ready to get going. And if it doesn't sound that way, then we're just not going to allow the practice to go south. Fatigue is something that we're going to combat. The longer practice goes, the more fatigue guys get, and the mental toughness has to come through of still doing the little things correctly. So that's a part of it.
Ben, on that topic, would you say your play calls are on the shorter end or longer end?
Depends. Depends on what we're trying to get done. I would have said 3 years ago, shorter end, and then things have gotten a little bit more complex. And now that we're back to building it from square one again, it's a blend of probably when I first started play calling to where I ended last year. And we're trying to find that right mix. We're also trying to challenge these guys and see how much we can handle too. Every position group on offense, we're trying to see how much they can download and what they can apply. And we'll revisit that as a staff at the end of OTAs and decide what the best course of action for us going forward into the season is going to look like. And training camp might be a little bit different because of that.
See, I can see myself feeling like, well, okay, it's breaking the huddle. Like, how big of a deal is it really that important that they exit the huddle in the exact way that you need them to, or that the play call is delivered perfectly in the exact way that, like, isn't it kind of just like, can't it just be good enough? Like, you can't get a penalty for leaving the huddle incorrectly. I guess if you had 12 men in the huddle, you could get a penalty, but like that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about literally, the 11 guys staying in a circle, and then when they leave that circle to go line up in the line of scrimmage, he made them run back into their huddle circle and then leave that huddle properly to get to the line of scrimmage. Like that's never going to be a penalty. And realistically, is it ever going to cause you a problem in a game? Probably not. So what's the big deal then? But it's sort of that, it's that phrase, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's like, well, if you start kind of saying, well, okay, it doesn't really matter how you do that, then all of a sudden people can be a little bit more lax and can kind of feel like, well, you can, again, cutting corners is not exactly the right word because it's not about doing it intentionally, but it's just about not being sharp. And if you're not super sharp on how you're coming out, then it's easy to kind of let the next thing slip that does then become a problem. And so for Ben Johnson, it's saying, no, we're going to make sure everything we do is correct. And it doesn't mean you chew out every player for every little mistake they make or bench any player who makes one little mistake, but it does mean you call it out and correct it every time and make sure that everyone knows what the expectation is and how it is supposed to look and why it's important for it to be that way. That's the other aspect. Like when we talk about Ben Johnson being a good communicator, right? He takes the players in on here's why the details matter. Here's what the details are. I'm going to communicate every aspect of it. This is why it's important for you to stand here in the huddle. And when you break the huddle, for you to turn around and run this way so that you don't accidentally cross over with your teammate or bump into each other. Because I could imagine if for some reason a play call's in late or you're in a hurry up and you just need to get the play rolling, like everyone's got to be able to line up and go on the right path and not get in each other's way or not trip or not cause any kind of problems. Like there's going to be times when we just need this execution to be perfect. So we're going to hold you to that now in OTAs and make you do it and correct it so that it doesn't become a lingering problem or a problem that gets worse or gets sloppy or anything like that. It can just be done correctly and establish that tone for everything on the football field. And that can go a really long ways towards preventing penalties. That yes, leaving the huddle is not going to cause a penalty, but if you're sloppy on that, then maybe you're not paying close enough attention to what the snap count was and you jump on a false start. Or you're sloppy leaving the huddle and then you're not paying close enough attention to how close to the line of scrimmage you are, then you get an illegal formation, right? Like it's not that the huddle itself is the problem, but it's what it can lead to there. And so focusing on that early in OTAs and correcting those mistakes then when there's no consequences is the time to establish that. And I think it's strong leadership and communication for Ben Johnson to get out in front of that, even on little things that should be inconsequential themselves, but are not inconsequential outside of the vacuum of the individual thing. And making sure that players understand that and then are bought into that is how you build a successful winning culture there. And it's about that communication is key, right? Because communicating that clearly and openly is kind of the difference between building a miserable military style. I think of the Bill Belichick Patriots at times. Obviously they were really successful and it worked for them, but those players kind of hated it. It was not very fun. And you can have discipline and accountability and perfection and also just be real about it. And it doesn't have to be cold, stern Bill Belichick, do it again. I can't do a Bill Belichick voice, but it's just drill sergeant, right? It's just not drop and give me 20 every time you mess up, but it's hey guys, we got to do this right because we need to do everything right. And here's why it matters. And there can be this mutual understanding instead of just purely this drill sergeant, top down yelling of this is how we're going to do it. Why? Because I said so. It's no, here's why. And then once you as the player understand, now you're almost even more motivated to do it because it makes sense to you. You're not just blindly following what the head coach said because the head coach said it, but he's communicating to you and bringing you in on the logic and the process there. So you have some ownership of why it makes sense and why you need to do what you're supposed to do and why you do need to pay attention to every detail as opposed to being just because I said so or because coach said so or because coach is always right and we have to trust coach. It's it can be more than that once you have that proper communication and attention to detail. So I really like the way Ben Johnson is establishing things there. I like the way he's establishing things with Caleb Williams, the way Case Keenum is helping it out. Everything seems to be lining up nicely so far for the Bears in OTAs. It's just OTAs, a long way to go, and we still got to see how this plays out in training camp and everything else, but I think we can all be encouraged by the direction so far. As we get more updates from Chicago Bears OTAs, you can be sure we'll break them down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for a second listen, you can check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. As we eventually get closer to training camp and more moves start to be made, the hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. So go find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming back on Monday for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity for you to bear down.